Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. There's a new bipartisan push to revitalize downtown St. Louis, but could crime or chaos disrupt those big plans? For years, for example, the old Railway Exchange building and its neighboring garage sat empty, covered in graffiti, disrepair, vacant. Now the Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority, they have plans to demolish that garage and make way for something new. Leaders say they've set aside about $2 million to do that so far, but they need millions more to fully clear the rest of the block. More help could be coming soon from Jefferson City, too. The Missouri House just perfected a plan to offer $50 million a year in tax credits to convert those office to residential spaces. That would help buildings like the Railway Exchange, like the vacant AT&T Tower downtown. But all this comes as St. Louis police had to issue a temporary juvenile curfew last weekend. All that after another violent weekend before it that saw young people storming city streets. Police took 23 kids into custody Friday night. No one was caught out after curfew on Saturday or Sunday. St. Louis Alderman Rasheen Aldridge and Jamie Cox-Antwi, who both represent downtown, are now on the record. Alderman and Alderwoman, good to have you both with us.
Thanks for having us.
Alderwoman Cox-Antwi, I'd like to start with you, if I can. Look, 17 of the 23 kids detained in this curfew were from outside the city limits, we know that. The youngest, just 11 years old. Does that change the conversation about whether this was a downtown crime problem?
Well, I think the first thing it reminds us is that downtown is a regional asset. It's a place where people from the entire region want to be. And so when you find out that a lot of the juveniles that were in downtown aren't from here, I think it puts into perspective that we need downtown to be a positive, more attractive place for young people, and we need to provide them with things for them to do.
Alderman, you criticized the curfew, and I get that. I respect your position, but here's one of the problems with that. We had March Madness. We had national TV cameras here. The whole country had its eyes on St. Louis. And then you have those optics, the kids with big guns in parts of South City and parts of St. Louis with these street takeovers, all the chaos that comes with it. Those ingredients don't mix. I'm sure you'd agree the mayor had to do something. Why do you think what she did was the wrong thing?
I wouldn't say it was the wrong thing. I think it deserves a bigger conversation now that we've seen the curfew that, happened over the last weekend. What I was very concerned to see was the young kids that was in zip ties, right? And I understand that we have March Madness, we have all these other events. Is it that we need to establish a curfew? Is it just more police presence? We already have, a partnership with St. Louis County and police when we have these events. So why not have more presence in certain areas instead of, I think, maybe jumping a curfew? But since that's happened, I think, it's about now, what does that look like to make sure that we support young people? How do we have safe spaces for young people? How do we have opportunity for them if they are going to come downtown or other parts of our city, that we are establishing proactive methods to make sure that young people have spaces to go? Because right now the reality is they do not have nowhere to go.
The Board of Aldermen President Megan Green says in a public statement, and I'm reading directly from it, that there's, quote, ample research that juvenile curfews do not reduce crime and that they make youth more likely to engage in criminal behavior in the future. Both of you represent downtown. I want to ask you directly, do you think that research is wrong, or are you suggesting that maybe sometimes the city has to act even if they think maybe the data suggests it might not work out?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I would call it a success, but I did think it was a necessary step. Given the activity that we saw on 314 Day with the street takeovers, not just downtown, but broadly across the entire city, I do think there's a time and the place for a city to send a message that we won't accept certain types of behavior. And I think a curfew can be a positive step to that. As we saw, we did have some activity on Friday, but we saw no activity on Saturday and no activity on Sunday. So the city responded and people listened. But I think that's not the only step that needs to be taken. It wasn't the only step that the mayor took, by the way, but I think it can be part of a holistic solution. And I think it started a conversation about what now do we need to do to make sure that we can provide more holistic alternatives for youth.
Very interesting. One of the departments that provides some of those is the Office of Violence Prevention. President Green tells us that office runs out of funding in June, just a couple months from now. If we're serious about the alternatives to curfews being community investment and violence prevention, how does that office close in June while we're sitting here debating whether 11-year-olds should be out past 10? I mean, who's responsible for that, and what are you both prepared to do about it?
Yeah, I would say I don't believe the office is going to close in June. So that office was created under the previous administration with ARPA funds. So that's how that office was set up. And a lot of those ARPA funds, actually all the ARPA funds for that office went to that office to make sure that it runs. But, the Board of Aldermen, the mayor's office, and all of us at City Hall is committed to making sure that this office continues to operate. We're going into the budget year. Our budget is done by July 1st. So June is like right in that area. But I will let you, I'm pretty confident that the Office of Violence Prevention is going to stay there. And that's one of the offices that we need to be proactive and not reactionary to crime. How do we support our youth? How do we reduce gun violence? How do we reduce violence in the city of St. Louis? This office is a great way to do that. And, we're going to make sure that they're funded in the general revenue.
All right, let's talk about, go ahead.
I want to quickly add to that. One thing that the office does do well is partner with a lot of existing community organizations that already do that work. Employment Connection, Mission STL. We know that this needs to be a community-driven solution, and we need to work with those partners long-term as well.
And let's zoom out for a minute, because there's a lot more at stake here than any one weekend of police report crime reporting statistics. There's the Jefferson Arms Building, the Railway Exchange, the Millennium Hotel, there's the AT&T Tower. I mean, these are monuments to what this city once was with our storied history. And right now, Missouri Republicans in Jefferson City are writing a bill to bring these buildings back online. They had Democrats' help, by the way. But they see money in it. In fact, the way they wrote that bill tells us they see potential for profit coming out of these big buildings if we can just turn them back online. But if downtown can't shake this perception problem, then none of that happens, right? So I want to ask you both, which came first, the unsafe city or the empty buildings?
I would say I think the perception problem is, I think, the right portion of that. And when you have vacant buildings, you do create a broader perception problem, because we know that the #1 solution to crime is just having eyes on the street. So I personally am glad Jefferson City is finally recognizing the asset and the tool that downtown St. Louis can be. If I had to answer your question, I would say when you have vacant buildings, you create an unsafe perception problem. But Alderman Aldridge and I know, and we spend a lot of time downtown, downtown isn't really unsafe. We just need to show people what the community and the potential can be. And I think these buildings have a lot of potential to do that when we see the Millennium Hotel coming down and potentially a new AT&T project coming online.
All right, last question, because I know we're up against the clock here. I need an honest answer from you both. 5 years from now, the Railway Exchange, the AT&T Tower, they all have people in it. Their lights are on. Maybe there are data centers humming in parts of downtown. That's a whole other can of worms. The Office of Violence Prevention is funded. Kids aren't being zip-tied after dark on a Friday night. Is that a realistic picture of this city, or is that just some sales brochure, some campaign literature? And what's the one thing that has to happen for any of that to be real?
I would say I think all that's real. You see the momentum already happening downtown. If it's a Millennium Hotel coming down, we've been in conversations with the AT&T developer to make that happen. Jefferson Arms is very close. There's a lot of positive things that are happening in the downtown area and across this region. I can see all those things happening. I think what it's going to take is we just need to continue as city leaders, continue to be in collaboration and work together to make these things a reality, and understand that it's going to be a challenge, but we have to be on the same page. And we honestly, I believe, have to be our biggest cheerleaders to make sure it actually gets done.
So he says collaboration and cheerleading are the things that need to happen. Are those things not happening now?
I think we're starting to go the right direction. I would say this is not only the direction that we're going, but it is the potential that the city has. I totally see everything you just said happening. I also would add that in order to get it done, we need the right tools in the toolbox. The entertainment district was the beginning. Hopefully we see a state bill that supports that effort. And then in the long term, we also have community partners that are bringing everybody back downtown.
1/6 of City Hall. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We're back in a moment. Meet the Republican challenging Nikki Budzinski. Jeff Wilson is on the record next. Illinois Democrat Nikki Budzinski has been growing her lead in recent elections, where she represents the 13th congressional district on Capitol Hill. But now a Republican hopes to take her on and perhaps unseat her come November. Republican nominee for the 13th congressional district in Illinois, Jeff Wilson, joins us now on the record. Good to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here, Mark.
Glad to have you. You say on your campaign website and your materials that you'll work to lower prices and costs for working families. But tariffs on imported goods like steel and farm equipment, consumer products, those are all raising prices right now.
Yes.
Economists across the political spectrum
Yes.
say that the American consumer, the voter, is bearing a lot of that cost. So how do you square your promise to lower costs with your support for a president whose tariff policy is actively making things more expensive?
Good question. For me, I want costs to be lower, but for me, as you know from my background, nuclear energy, master's degree in nuclear engineering, served on a nuclear submarine, spent 30 years in the nuclear industry, been to all 11 nuclear power plants here in Illinois. The key driver to cost is energy. And I agree with President Trump's policy to drive energy costs down. And what we need in Illinois is more energy generation, not less energy generation. And most of our costs, a lot of our hidden cost is from energy. So I want to see more energy come in. Now, when you talk about like tariffs and stuff like that, I believe that will be temporary. We still have a little ways to go. But as you know, the founding of the United States started out with tariff. And it's been that way for 250 years or so. So I think about it. It's going to happen. It'll work out.
Should Congress take more control over the president's power to assert tariffs?
It's a balance. It's a balance
Well,
based
right now,
upon.
there's just one actor, and Congress is basically standing idle.
Well,
The Supreme Court stepped in.
yes, the Supreme Court stepped in, and the
Should
Congress has to
put
do their
more
right.
active limits on the president's use of tariff power?
It depends.
On?
It depends on how it impacts the people of the United States.
Let's talk about political resumes. You mentioned your experience in the military, and certainly that's
Yes.
something I think most American voters appreciate and respect. You served on the Champaign County Board. It's something. It's not
Twice
Congress.
elected. Yeah, it's not Congress.
Congresswoman Budzinski spent years as a labor organizer. She went on to work in Governor Pritzker's administration. She advised the Biden White House in its budget office, and now she's in Congress. She's been there for several terms now. Why should a farmer in Decatur or a machinist in Decatur fire her and hire you?
Good question. Because I have real world experience. And just like you said, Mark, all she's done is be an advocate for certain constituents, not the whole state. She's never worked a job like I have worked a job. She's never been in the field. I've dug ditches in potato farms. I know what it's like for real world experience for real families to live in Illinois and not for special interest.
In some of your campaign materials, you say here that you want to protect girls' sports from transgender athletes. And I always look these things up, looking to see if I could find any specific examples of this happening, say in the Illinois 13th Congressional District. So my question is this a problem that you've actually encountered in the 13th District, or is it a talking point that fits onto a bumper sticker and gets people excited?
Well, why wouldn't you be excited? Who in the right mind would want a guy?
So you're saying
in a
it's more
ladies'
excitement,
sport?
less about actual encountered incidents?
I personally have not encountered that.
Okay.
However, it is ludicrous to have a guy in a female sport. Doesn't even make sense. Why would you even do that?
I guess my question is one of priorities. You're running a campaign for Congress. You're saying here's an issue that you've not actually seen occur in the real world in your district. Why make that a part of your campaign?
It's common sense.
You're campaigning against something that you just said you don't know is happening.
Oh, you twisted my words, but thank you for doing that, Mark. I appreciate it. It's just common sense. It's common sense that men should be in men's sport and women should be in women's sport. It's a 90-10, 99.1, 99.9 to 1.1 issue.
Is there one thing you can look to and say, I would stand up to President Trump and oppose him on this?
Oh, sure there is. If it doesn't redound to the benefit of the individuals of Illinois, my priority is the state of Illinois.
Is there an example?
Well, I would say I am not altogether, I'm kind of mixed on this one with respect to private partnerships with the government. I think the government should stay out of the private industry. I think the government should stay out of the private market and let the markets do what the markets do best.
So
That's my opinion.
So the federal government taking a large stake in chips companies, was it NVIDIA, was it others, IBM, was it?
Yeah.
You think Congress should step in and oppose that or do something to break the federal government off? How should it divest?
As far as the details, I'm not going to tell you what the details are. It may be the right thing to do on certain issues, and it may not be, but it's worth deliberation. That's why we have Congress. That's why their legislators, executives execute.
But you know, the voters don't elect someone who says, you know what, I'll go there
Deliberate.
and think about it. They want to know what you think before they send you there.
No, that's wrong.
You don't think voters deserve to know what positions you'll take to Congress?
Yes, they do. And I already told you what the three positions are. Do you remember what I said?
I ask for a longer list. That's why we're here, is to learn more about you, not just
So
those
the
campaign
three main
materials.
items, the three main items is keep our country safe, keep the border secure, improve the economy of Illinois, and I believe the best way to improve the economy is to unleash energy, particularly nuclear energy. I would like to see more nuclear energy here in Illinois, which there's 11 nuclear power plants in Illinois. Illinois has the most nuclear energy in the country. Actually, 50% of our energy generation
Understood.
is from nuclear. So I want to see that.
At risk of putting too fine a point on this, the original question was, is there anything that you would stand up to President Trump on? Is there any agenda item, any action he's taken that you would oppose from a perch in Congress? And your answer was generally, well, maybe the federal government taking ownership stake in companies, but you're not
that's true.
sure, you're still thinking about it.
Depends on the details. So you're asking me to give you details that I may not know yet.
I am. That's my job.
You're doing a wonderful job.
Jeff Wilson, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
St. Louis County Executive Sam Page faced new questions this week about a criminal case against him. State prosecutors accused Page of using public money to try and swing voters against Prop B last year in violation of the law. He says he's innocent. He faces 2 felony and 2 misdemeanor charges and has pleaded not guilty. But earlier this month, Missouri Attorney General Catherine Hanaway sought testimony from FBI agents on that case. And that was disclosed in discovery right before they were going to trial. He initially asked for a speedy trial and then waived his right to that speedy trial, saying, wait, hold on a minute, let's slow this down. So reporters on Tuesday asked Page, why are FBI agents lining up to testify against you?
Call Andrew Bailey and ask him. I'm confident that nothing was wrong there, and look forward to telling my story when I get a chance.
Bailey, you might know, is the one who filed that original case against Page, now serves as the co-deputy director of the FBI. No court date has yet been set for trial. We're back in a moment to check the record. Reporters get emails all the time with press releases, but rarely does the Senate staffer who sent it follow up with a text and encourage you, hey, this is a big deal. So here's what's in that. Eric Schmidt, Missouri's junior senator, very excited about freedom, wants you to know he won. Big, historic, the deep state has finally been put into check. Let's check the record to see what actually happened behind that press release. Let's turn the clock back to May 2022. It was then Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration, claiming the federal government had colluded with Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to silence conservative speech. It was actually speech about science and vaccines and life and death, but still, it was speech the White House took notice of, disapproved of, in very sternly written emails. Those emails and the contents of them are now public, as they should be, and for good reason. But discovery and victory are 2 very different things. The court documents show a different story than the one I found in my inbox. For about 2.5 years, through motions, appeals, discovery, depositions, the whole thing, it finally landed at the Supreme Court. And what did the Supreme Court say? The plaintiffs probably couldn't prove they had standing. That's lawyers speak for, hey, your case is on life support here. Then November 2024 happens. Donald Trump wins the presidency, and suddenly the lawsuit starts taking very different shape. It was almost like magical chairs in the courtroom. See, 2 of the scientists who brought this case alongside Schmidt, Dr. Jayanta Bhattacharya and Dr. Martin Kulldorff, they had to quietly withdraw from the lawsuit. Why? Because Trump hired them. Bhattacharya now runs the National Institutes of Health, and Kulldorff took a post at Health and Human Services. So the people suing the government became the government. Oh, and John Sauer, he was Missouri's lawyer in this case at first. He withdrew too because he's now the Solicitor General of the United States, the government's own lawyer who argued that case before the Supreme Court. So who signed off on this settlement on behalf of the defendants here? It was the United States government. Brett Shumate, he's Trump's assistant attorney general. Missouri sued the Biden administration. The Biden administration left town. The Trump administration came in, looked at the lawsuit filed by their own allies and said, yeah, we'll take that deal. And the consent decree, which Schmidt calls a historic First Amendment victory, well, we checked the fine print. It protects the social media accounts of 5 specific plaintiffs. It does not protect you. It says so, paragraph 26. Now, here's what the consent decree actually restrains. 3 government agencies, the Surgeon General, the CDC, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Not the FBI, not the White House, not the FCC. The FCC, whose chairman, Brendan Carr, has threatened to yank the broadcast licenses of local TV stations if the president maybe doesn't like how they cover the American military. That is the federal government threatening a legal and regulatory punishment against media companies over protected speech. That is, by the way, the exact thing this consent decree claims to prohibit. Senator Schmidt has not yet said a word about that, and we've asked him about it. Maybe he thinks the deep state is only a problem when the other team is running it. That does it for our show this week. Until next time, we're off the record.